that, gentlemen, we will start with the lame duck agenda. So the hot items that are off the agenda now is that voter ID bills and the expanding public records requests to the governor's office. But back on is now the energy bills that they're looking at, and also no-fault insurance. So what's going on there in Lansing? I love this last-minute flurry of activity, Nolan.
Yeah, they didn't get as much done as I think they hoped. They whiffed on most of the big items they brought up: the pension reform, the brownfield credits, the incentives, business incentives that business leaders for Michigan push. A lot of big things didn't get done. They're going to go into the night tonight on energy to try to see if they could get that piece done. If they do that, I think they will have accomplished something in lame duck. Otherwise, it's pretty much a bust.
Do you think that people have a little bit of eye rolling, though, when they see the legislature going till 4:30 in the morning and making this last-minute push when they could have maybe done some of this stuff a little bit earlier?
Well, I mean, and again, it's this rushed effort to get these things passed because they feel less accountable for what they do because it's after the election. I mean, all of this is absurd. There's nothing on their agenda that has to get done by January 1st. I mean, it's sort of an artificial deadline that they've set because, again, that's when the new legislature takes its seats. All of this stuff, if it's important enough, I think can wait till the next year, and we can actually have a debate about it and maybe some hearings. Get people to shape the legislation in the way that it's
Specifically,
supposed to.
Biggest disappointment for you?
Well, I mean, I think all of it. I mean, it's like sorting through a trash heap. All of the stuff that they're doing is problematic because of the way that they're doing it. I mean, the voter ID bill is the worst, I think, of the lot, because there's really no need for that. I mean, it comes out of nowhere. It's just another punitive attempt at voter suppression. But the rest of it is just as bad in terms of substantive policy making. There's nothing going on there that looks like regular lawmaking. And part of the reason that this stuff takes so long, too, holding the floor open for as long as they do and all this stuff, is because you have inexperienced people running these chambers.
That's exactly
Kevin
right.
Cotter and Arlen Meekoff do not know what they're doing.
Well, Meekoff's a much better,
He's better at it
leader than Cotter, and maybe one of the better ones we've had in a while. But you're looking here at the one more negative impact of term limits. I agree, all of this stuff could wait to January, but it's a new legislature in January, so it's all got to be reintroduced, and it's all got to be debated again.
And they should have done it when they were not meeting for most of this year.
You've got to educate lawmakers again. I mean, the term limits has ruined effective lawmaking.
So what happened to your push for part-time
we're
legislature,
back at it
Nolan?
We're back at it. We couldn't get it together for the 16, but we're back at it, looking at 18 and looking at putting together a study of what will work with a part-time legislature and what voters would accept in terms of extending term limits, which is the real objective here is to get term limits extended. And I think we can get it on 18. I think the people will support it.
It's a part-time legislature anyway. They have met, what, 86 days of 2016? Some ungodly low
So you think you
number.
might as well make it official?
Well, and yet, though, they introduce about a bill a day.
Yeah, right.
All this pet peeve legislation, anytime someone gets a wild hair, they introduce a bill, that something goes wrong in their neighborhood, and I can introduce a bill to take care of that. It's not the way lawmaking should work. No. They should focus on priorities, and they usurp too much of what should be done in local communities.
This has become a really bad actor, the legislature here. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw the Bridge Magazine piece this week about the amount of self-dealing that goes on. Legislators introducing bills to benefit themselves. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that in other states you go to prison for. I mean, the way we have allowed this branch of our government to just sort of run wild, and it's unmanaged, partially because of term limits, partially because there's no ethics rules, partially because they're not subject to FOIA, so we don't see what they're doing.
Another item that died in
it's the weakest ethics laws in the nation in Michigan, and there's no excuse for it. And they lobbyists shower them with money. You go sit in a bar in Lansing, and you watch these lobbyists walk in with lawmakers on their arms. In other places, that's not okay. They've got to report that. Tickets, trips here, trips there, and they're all on a short-term schedule, trying to get theirs, get out, get to their next job, and they do always looking ahead, how to benefit themselves and how to set themselves up for when they're done with the legislature.
A couple quick things I also want to get to of note this week. Ron Romney McDaniel's got essentially a thank you for delivering Michigan. You are now the head of the RNC. Stephen, what do you think about that?
It's good for Michigan. I mean, it's great to have somebody local in a position of that prominence. I'm not a fan of hers as party chair here. I think she's somebody who's really has had a difficult time articulating points beyond the sort of usual talking points. I mean, it's really frustrating to interview her. This is not somebody who's thinking about what you're talking about. She's just reading off a script. But she did a good job delivering Michigan for the first time in 20-some years to Donald Trump. And again, it puts the state in the spotlight at the national level, which is never a bad thing.
Well, and, beyond the presidential race, which was fairly remarkable, they lost very little. Republicans came into this thinking, gosh, the House is in play. We might lose our majority at the state levels. Didn't.
Right.
How many House seats did they lose?
They didn't lose any House seats, I don't think.
So that was a good job. She was responsible for the recruiting. She was responsible for assigning assets around the state. She impressed a lot of people for good reason. I think she's going to be a good national chair. And the question then becomes, who replaces her? I'm hearing this morning, Ron Weiser's out on the radio saying he wants to be the next chair. And if that's the case, that's a game changer for Michigan in 2018.
All right.
Because he can raise a ton of money, and he's an excellent organizer, and he has never lost. He was chair before. I mean,
but can he be chair and regent? I mean, he won that race at the university.
I mean, of course he can, and so.
Well, but if you were in the legislature and you were chair, you had to quit.
Well, it's not the same rules for this. I mean, believe me, he's not giving up that U of M seat.
All right. So another thing that caught my attention this week was that Lansing finally pulled out the last lead pipe, and this has been a 12-year process for the city of Lansing in removing all of their lead pipes in their water system, which got me thinking a little bit about Flint and the fact that it was about a year ago that national attention finally focused on Flint and caused quite a storm and then a lot of action here. But it feels like we're still not seeing a ton of action in terms of speeding up the process of replacing pipes or speeding up the process of getting that kind of funding or coordination, though, even though we know that the water quality is getting better, we are still not at a good point.
It's not I mean, the water is much, much better and it's on its way. But in terms of replacing pipes, that's not a fast process. You mentioned Lansing just finished it after 12 years.
And a coordinated effort. I still feel that there's not real.
In a city that doesn't have the level of abandonment that you see in Flint. So one of the things in Flint is how much of the infrastructure are you going to replace when it's infrastructure that was built for a much larger population that is now much smaller and probably likely to get smaller because of the water crisis. I mean, those are some of the things that I think would add to delays in terms of figuring out how to do it. But we did see Congress pass the bill to pay for it or to begin paying for it. I think it's $200 million.
Yeah, Lansing did it for something like $45 million, and we're talking, hundreds and hundreds of millions for Flint. They're not done with the mapping yet. They're getting a lot of help from U of M trying to figure out
Flint's a bigger city than Lansing too, though.
Yeah,
isn't
it is, but still, it's not a hurry. Something you're going to do at a crisis speed. You got to map it out. You got to bid it out, and then start the work. It's a slow process.
All right, and finally, we have a CEO as a Secretary of State, and I know that people have been talking about Rex Tillerson's appointment.
Yeah, I think it's, obviously I'm not a fan of.
Wait, what? You're not a fan?
Not a fan of the president-elect. I'm not a fan of the appointees. I think there is another level, though, of interest here, which is the idea of transactional diplomacy, which this president-elect seems to already be engaging in the way that he's dealing with foreign leaders, and this Secretary of State seems prone to that kind of approach as well, and that's a real change for the United States. I mean, whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, that has not been the way we have conducted foreign policy in the past.
At least not above board. I mean, we did ship a plane load of cash to Iran, but on this appointment, I mean, I'm a little concerned about his lack of diplomatic experience, but our approach to Russia has not work. We are at a very dangerous point in our relationship. There's no communication between our two armies, so maybe bringing someone in who has had some experience and success with them is not a bad way to go.
All right, we're going to have to see that play out.